Open up the champagne, pop. It's my house, come on, turn it up. Hear a knock on the door and the night begins.
Hey folks, welcome back to Welcome to My World, and it is Dominique back here with you. We're going to be talking today about an issue that's a little bit more on the serious side, perhaps even the controversial side for some, although honestly, myself, I don't see the controversy, but I want to really kind of talk with you guys about this issue, even so. Basically, several of my readers and listeners have written in to ask me some questions about Chicago. I live in the Chicago area. My entire family is from Chicago. We're proud North Siders, Chicago Cubs. and, you know, I think I have some insight as a Chicagoan and just as somebody who, you know, it comes from a bit of a mixed background myself into what's really going on in Chicago. And essentially, the folks who have written in have said things like, and I know they're absolutely well-meaning, so I'm not calling anyone out. Don't think I am. I'm not, I promise. But have said things like, oh man, I'm glad you're still alive, which is like, ooh, that's a bit of a zinger. That's a bit of a backhanded compliment, if ever there were a backhanded compliment. I'm glad you're alive. Glad you made it out of there okay. Okay, I mean, I didn't make it out. I'm still here. I'm just like 40 minutes away, but thanks. And, you know, the most common comment that I receive is, wow, I can't believe you live there. Is it really a war zone? Is Chicago really a war zone? Is it really a dangerous place to be? And that makes me sad to hear. It really does. It makes me incredibly sad to hear that, as somebody who just absolutely loves the city of Chicago and who spends quite a bit of time there. That makes me really sad to hear. No, and the answer to that question is no, it's not a war zone, at least not entirely. We do have some major issues that need further and more appropriate and more effective attention. Absolutely, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna pussyfoot around on that one. We do have some issues that absolutely need to be attended to. And yes, people are losing their lives, but it's not a war zone. You know, there are many other cities with similar issues. Philadelphia has similar issues. Detroit has similar issues. LA has similar issues, right? So Cleveland even has very similar issues to Chicago. But Chicago has been in the news a lot, and we have had our fair share of shootings. Unfortunately, we have had quite a few gang shootings. We've had quite a few gang shootings gone wrong. Not that I think a gang shooting can ever go right, but you know, we've had quite a few shootings, and unfortunately, it's not all, you know, gang members. Some of it is perpetrated by the police. It's got to be said. Look, I respect first responders as much as the next person, but it's got to be said, we have an issue here with the police and with the police not representing us and not looking like us and not being from where we're from in life, both physically and emotionally and education-wise. It's a real issue, and it's a really tough one at that. Many of you probably have heard about a lot of the killings that have taken place, and that's really not what we're going to focus on today, although, of course, those people who have lost their lives absolutely do deserve all the attention that they can get in terms of helping us to move forward on a healthier path as Chicagoans, whether we be police officers, whether we be community members, whether we be public servants, community leaders, right? But that's not 100% what we're going to focus on today. Many of you may have heard of the Laquan McDonald shooting. I think that was one of the worst shootings that Chicago has experienced. Not only because Laquan McDonald was a child, essentially, but because he was armed. He wasn't breaking the law. He was walking down the street, and he was shot by police. In fact, he had an entire clip emptied into him and just fell like a puppet without strings to the ground and lay there dead upon hitting the ground. And it was really horrific and just something that I think every Chicagoan needs to watch. There is actual public video of this. Not something that we're going to watch for fun, certainly, or for amusement, but it's something we all need to really understand and feel and kind of bring to the forefront of our minds and say, hey, this is really happening. This is really going on. But like I said, we're not going to focus on just, shootings and victims and who did what to whom. We know in Chicago that, sadly, law enforcement is a part of the problem. And we know that gangs are a huge problem. And so I'm trying to address those people who have come to me and either expressed concern about my living here or have said, oh, I'm so glad you're okay, or what have you. Am I in immediate danger? God, no. I mean, any of us could walk outside the door and be hit by a bus, right? Any of us could walk outside the door and be struck by lightning. Any of us could drop dead from a heart attack, right? So aside from that, am I in immediate danger? No, absolutely not. I live in a beautiful, beautiful area. I'm looking out the window right now at the gorgeous hills and the gorgeous river, and I'm pretty darn lucky. I live in a really beautiful mid-rise building, high security, upper middle class. I have nothing to complain about. Please don't feel like I'm living in Inglewood or something. I'm not. But there are people who are. In fact, one of the people who I just answered, who had asked me this morning, in fact, about the safety in Chicago, or lack thereof, or perceived lack thereof, actually kind of opened my eyes to something. And when I answered their question, this is kind of how I answered it. They opened my eyes to the fact that some people don't realize that there are at least 3 cities within Chicago. Now, I'm not talking about the boroughs of New York or something like that. I'm talking about at least 3 different life experiences that people living in Chicago might be able to expect to have based upon their skin color, unfortunately, based upon their level of education, rather, and based upon just their socioeconomic status. And, of course, what family they were born into. That matters as well. That's definitely a factor. Now, like I said, at least 3 cities exist within Chicago. The first, I'm just going to work my way from north to south, okay? The first is, generally the north side. Now, I'm not talking so much Lincoln Park, though to an extent, I suppose Lincoln Park is really part of the north side, but I'm going to kind of lump Lincoln Park and Belmont Harbor and all those sorts of affluent areas into the loop category that I'm going to address in a moment. So the first category is sort of the north side, the working class, middle to upper middle class neighborhoods. There are a lot of gastropubs, a lot of artisan shops, a lot of cool little businesses. There's Wrigley Field, of course. There's the cemetery that is such a tourist attraction. There's obviously, there are a lot of Cubs fans who live there, a lot of working class type people in that area. And like I said, it's a burgeoning like business economy. There are a lot of gastropubs, a lot of like artisan shops. There are a lot of kind of new businesses going up, new loft spaces going up, new apartment buildings going up. It's becoming a more affluent area, and it's not through gentrification. It's just sort of through, I guess, the hard work of the people who live there, which I think should be the case for just about any neighborhood. I don't think that gentrification is always as helpful as we want to think it is, especially outside gentrification from the outside in. But yeah, the north side is middle to upper middle class, working class people, blue collar people who bring home, a decent amount of money, some white collar sort of small business owners, that sort of thing. So it's somewhere that's a relatively safe place to live. There's really not a lot of violence, not a lot of like organized type crime. There's not a lot of gang crime, certainly. You'd be hard pressed to find a lot of gang members on the north side. I'm sure there are a few, I guess, but really you'd be very hard pressed to find any kind of an organization, a gang-like organization that really runs the north side, any of the neighborhoods in the north side. So again, kind of a working class, upper middle class area. It's a really lovely area, actually, and it is, as far as skin color, as far as socioeconomic background, it's quite diverse. It's a nice little area. Now, the second city that exists within Chicago is the Loop area. And like I mentioned, I'm kind of throwing in, Belmont Harbor, Lincoln Park into that. I'm grouping those neighborhoods into the Loop. And the Loop area is the area everybody comes to visit, the touristy area. Now, there's some crime there, but not too much. Not too much. It's very nice. It's very upscale. It's very wealthy. Unfortunately, it has to be said, it is a more predominantly white area, but there is some diversity there, certainly. It's where a lot of people commute to for work, even, working class people. But really, as far as folks who live there, it is that upper crust sort of society. It's like the apartments around Central Park in Manhattan, for instance. That's what the Loop is like. The Loop consists of the Sears Tower. I'm sorry, I'm not going to call it anything else. That's what it is, the Sears Tower. Get on board this thought train. That's what it is. And the Hancock Building and the Gold Coast and the Magnificent Mile, right? So it's a really cool area. I would definitely encourage you to visit. Navy Pier, all of the museums are pretty much in the Loop. It's a really lovely, lovely place. But a totally separate world from the north side, from the south side, from the west side. And the west side, by the way, is a place that I'm going to kind of group into the south side here, because it does extend into the south side and vice versa. Okay, so obviously you know what I'm going to say next. The third world or city within Chicago is the south side and does include some of those west side neighborhoods. There are certainly a few nicer, more upscale neighborhoods on the west side that are more affluent, that are moving toward, I guess, some sort of gentrification. Take, for instance, a Humboldt Park, right? So we're not going to say, the west side is terrible. It's not. The south side does have some issues, though. Most people in Chicago who live anywhere in or north of like Bronzeville are not going to want to visit like the real south side. That's where Sox Park is. South side is where Sox Park is, and the old Comiskey Park was there. The new Sox Park is there. The Bears play in the South Side, Soldier Field. So it's not that it's not a diverse and eclectic area. It is, certainly it is. But the South Side is that third kind of world, right? Between, the North Side, the Loop. I would probably myself, with my own background, end up living kind of toward the North Side, maybe in Bronzeville, not the South Side. Most people would not want to live on the South Side. People who do live there obviously are very proud of their neighborhood, are very sad to see what's happening. And many of them are doing their very best to improve conditions down there. But it's very hard because as long as drugs are illegal, there's going to be gang activity. There's going to be gang activity, right? Unfortunately, there's even human trafficking and that sort of thing that's based there. It's really not the best area. South of 95th, south of Garfield is not a good area to be in. You don't fall asleep on the Red Line L train and end up south of 95th. Let's put it that way. And I hate to say that. It's really unfortunate. It's really sad. And there have been times when I've even just been walking around Sox Park and it's not a good place to be. It's not a real safe place. But why is that, right? We said we were going to talk about that. Why is that? It's kind of hard to break down, but I would say if I had to break it down, it has to do with poverty. 100%. It has to do with poverty. Okay. So that, like I mentioned, like I touched on, there are neighborhoods like Bronzeville that are being kind of restructured from the inside out. Black business owners and philanthropists are working to create jobs in the community, are working to create affordable, nice housing within the community, and are really working very, very, very hard to bring the community together. And they're actually succeeding. So I really do see hope for Chicago, for the South Side especially. I see a lot of hope. And Bronzeville is actually a gorgeous area now. It used to be kind of a no-go zone, no matter what your skin color or background was. But now it's beautiful. It's being sort of reimagined from the inside out. And it's not outside gentrification, which I think is what really matters in this instance, right? It's not gentrification from other community members, from people outside of the community. It's being built up from the inside out, and I think that's a really great model to follow. So, yeah, we can actually change our own communities, and we can actually build our own communities and help our own communities. And it's so important to realize that. So important to realize that. Now, the South Side, again, south of Bronzeville, south of 95th, south of Garfield, around Washington, that area is really rife with crime. There are rapes, murders, auto theft, burglaries, just left, right, and center. It's literally a red zone for crime. Gangs are really, really popular there. It has to be said, gangs are really popular there, and it's really problematic and just really sad and upsetting as somebody who loves my city. It's really sad. It's really upsetting. And a lot of this stems from clashing between gangs and between people who are just, impoverished and absolutely sick of it, as they should be, and leaders and, police officers and law enforcement. And a lot of this a lot of the violence takes place between those two factions who, I think should really be working together and not against one another. I think the police should be working to help their community and should reflect the people who live in their community, should look like the people who live in their community. Jobs should be being offered as law enforcement officers to people from that community. Of course people are going to be upset and hurting and angry when we're bringing folks in from the outside to police them. Like there's some quarantine area. This is not the way that we need to approach things. So there is a lot of bad blood between law enforcement and the people who live on the South Side, and certainly between law enforcement and gangs. It's a real problem there. If you hadn't already guessed, the people who live south of 95th in particular are going to be more predominantly black, some brown, lower socioeconomic status, impoverished perhaps. Their kids are going to school hungry. And how are they going to learn when they're going to school hungry? Perhaps not being given the educational opportunities that other folks have and take for granted. For instance, there was a really great initiative by Chromebook to, supply like classrooms on the South Side with Chromebooks. Well, unfortunately, their schools were so dilapidated and so falling apart that they couldn't handle the electrical setup and that amount and that level of technology. And so right now, I believe they may still have a GoFundMe out, which is just so sad that they have to do that to upgrade their electrical system and their ability to handle more tech. So even when they get opportunities, those opportunities are taken away. It's a really horrific and really sad situation. Now, why are these communities segregated? Well, hey, it's a sore subject, but let's be real about it, okay? We're not here to BS anybody. We're not here to tickle anybody's ear. And if that's what you're looking for, you're on the wrong podcast, my friend. Essentially, the real problem, the real thing that created this monster is redlining policies, particularly of the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And yes, some redlining policies still exist today and are in practice today. Redlining is, if you're not aware, is a practice that was and even is still to an extent used to segregate communities, keep black people out of white communities. There are any number of tactics used, whether they be tactics used by actual elected officials to discourage black and brown folks from living in white neighborhoods or affluent neighborhoods, to redistricting of schools, to redistricting of representative government, whether it be like a House representative, an Illinois State Senate representative, whether it be alderman's district, whether it be court districts, whether it be, even just something like the county board district. This matters. This really affects the community. It really, I can't say too much about this because it affects the community in such a drastic way. And so also, it needs to be said that the redistricting that happens and the sort of push to get black and brown people the heck out of white neighborhoods, which is ridiculous, by the way. I think the influx of new blood into any neighborhood is a good thing, unless it's due to redlining and due to segregating policies, right? And institutional racism and institutional sexism, then obviously it's probably not going to have the best effects. But, anytime that new blood is being introduced into a community, those people are bringing new skills. They're bringing new specialized skills. They're bringing new education, new life experience, new backgrounds. And it's something that really helps to diversify communities and to help the economy to grow and to help families to have a better chance at success. And I guess that's something that white people tend to still struggle with. And it's certainly something that people of color struggle with, and not by their own design. But the redlining policies and the segregation and the institutional racist policies have forced people of color into certain neighborhoods, kind of by proxy. Like, well, we don't want you here and we don't want you there, so I guess you can go live over in that place, but like we might want it later, so when we do, we're just gonna like kind of scoot you out of the way again because you're not somebody we want in our neighborhood. Not the very best way to live life and be a human, but you know, it happens, and this is the effect it has. This is the effect it has on neighborhoods. So in Chicago, there was a real press for redlining and a real sort of exodus, too, of white people and affluent folks in the 1950s post-war to the suburbs. So there was a mass exodus from the city to the suburbs. And the folks that did stay behind in the city, the white folks that did stay behind in the city, wanted their neighborhoods white and wanted their neighborhoods the way that they, I guess, envisioned that they should be. And so people of color were given predatory home loans, or were less likely to even get any kind of a home loan, even a predatory one. Workers wouldn't come out to perform maintenance on their houses if they hired a company, if they wanted to hire a company, say, to fix their roof. No roofing companies would take the call of a quote-unquote colored person. If that family wanted to buy a car, invest in a college fund for their child, nobody would sell them the car. Nobody would help them to invest. Nobody would take their money, right? Which seems silly looking back nowadays, but it, even today, still happens. But back then, it was a real major issue. I mean, this was something that truly influenced and affected the Chicago area on a large scale, and still does, and the ramifications certainly are still present today. Of course, we started in the 1970s in particular, but then in the 80s, we really started building the housing complexes. For instance, Cabrini Green. There are several housing complexes in the South Side neighborhoods today, and we didn't do this out of the goodness of our hearts. We did it to get black and brown people out of white neighborhoods, and we did it also not just because of racism, but because of sort of fear of poverty and that stigma around poverty. We didn't want people who were impoverished around us. I think even today people have this kind of silly notion that poverty is catchy. Poverty is contagious. We don't want to see poverty because it reminds us that that's possible for us. We don't want to have poverty around us because what if it catches? Oh my gosh, what if we become impoverished? Oh, get those people out of here. We just don't want to see them. They're killing our vibe. Well, this is the consequence of those actions. This is the consequence. A bunch of low-income people who simply don't have a chance to get out of the lifestyle that they have to live to survive in a low-income, predominantly black and brown area that is absolutely unsafe, that's not a nurturing learning environment for children. Like I touched on before, how much do you think a child who goes to school hungry is going to learn? Probably not too much, right? Because they're sleep deprived, they're hungry, they're fearful for their safety. Of course they're not going to be able to focus on schoolwork. Adults can't even do that, and we're asking kids to. And then because of the ramifications of redlining and other institutionally biased programs, they don't have access to the same tools that white children and children of all races and ethnicities and backgrounds who have a slightly higher who exist, I should say, in a slightly higher income bracket. They don't have the same opportunities as those children. So this is why you hear about all of the killings and all of the violence. Being a member of a gang is something, unfortunately, that many people who live in such neighborhoods see as something that's necessary for their survival. They don't trust the police. They don't feel that the police represent them. They don't trust the government. They don't feel that the government represents them. And they don't. Look, it's true, they don't. I'm certainly not suggesting that gangs are good or appropriate or helpful, but They provide a false sense of community, a false sense of safety, and an emotional connection among sort of an emotionally barren landscape. And so you can see why they're attractive to people. And, you know, if your brother's in a gang or your sister's in a gang, you're more likely to be in a gang. Just statistically, if your parent is or was in a gang, you're more likely to be in a gang. If your uncle or aunt, you see what I'm saying? Then you're more likely yourself to be in a gang, to live a certain lifestyle. And it doesn't help when we take a look at, for instance, the Cook County, which is the county that Chicago exists in, the Cook County Jail. I believe 7 in 10 inmates there are black. Many of them are just sitting in overflow, waiting to be processed, waiting to even be charged with their crimes. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's very institutionally biased, institutionally racist, institutionally biased against people of a certain socioeconomic background. These people really don't have the same chances that you and I have. And I don't even have the same chances some of you have. But kids and even adults in that neighborhood would probably jump for joy to have some of the opportunities I've been afforded in my life, right? I mean, they are given a different starting line in the race, or the marathon, I should say, of life than you or I have been given. Like, most of you listening are probably somewhere close to where I'm at. Like, we're in the middle somewhere. Perhaps sex, gender, orientation, skin color is going to move us around and stagger us a little bit, but these people are at the absolute back. They're miles behind us, and they don't have the equipment and the tools to run any faster, okay? So what are they likely to do? Are they likely to keep running alongside and just hoping that they'll catch up? No, they're likely to stop running the fucking race, okay? Excuse me, but it's true. They're likely to stop running the race and just do something else and try to make of their probably short life what they can, right? And I also want to add that you and I don't exist every day with sort of a PTSD type situation. We don't exist every day for our safety, right? We don't have to worry about that. That's a privilege, and it's a privilege that's unearned. Now, I'm not saying you should hate yourself or be miserable because you're privileged. No, just see what you can do to boost other people's ability to attain what you've attained. Pay it forward. Help that person under you up on the ladder. And don't be too congratulatory about yourself when you do. Don't be like, oh, well, I'm the white savior of everybody, and you know what? I've done my job, and now I don't have to pay attention to this ugly poverty business anymore. No, it's not how it works. Keep paying it forward. Keep helping that person under you up a rung. You might need their help one day. Look at it that way, if that works for you. But this is why Chicago is seen somewhat mistakenly as a war zone, because there is a portion of Chicago that exists that is a war zone. Now, anybody who lives in the city of Chicago is not going to be victim to that same war zone, like I hope I was able to explain just now. Anyone who exists in the city of Chicago is not going to be the victim to that war zone, because we're not all equally affected by it. We're not all in the same area. We don't all have the same socioeconomic circumstances, right? We don't have all the same backgrounds. We're not all going to be affected by the war that's going on in the same way, if at all. And it's really not happening in the Loop. It's not happening on the north side. It's happening on the south side, and it's happening there for a reason. So no, the whole city of Chicago isn't unsafe. Feel free to visit. Feel free to come chill out over here. It's a pretty darn cool city. Lots of songs have been written about it, and you'll see why when you come here. But pay some homage to the existence, at least, of the third city, the city that people don't want to believe exists, the city rather that people don't want to visit. Pay some acknowledgement to the existence of that third city. It's not going to hurt you to do it. It doesn't cost anything to do it. And perhaps you might even find a way that you can help people, right? By simply acknowledging that this exists and that it's a problem and that you're a capable person who's had some privileges in your life. Maybe you'll be able to help, right? So please just keep that in mind. No, Chicago isn't a war zone on the whole. I promise you, any of the tourist attractions you're going to be safe going there unless you do something really stupid or are a very unfortunate victim of circumstance. If you go to the Bean, you don't have to tote an Uzi with you, right? You're not going to be visiting the neighborhoods of the South Side. You're not going to go to Inglewood to visit. But maybe you should think about what you can do. If you're in the area, maybe you'd like to volunteer at a food pantry on the South Side. I promise you don't have to live there. You can actually leave when you're done. You might want to volunteer at a shelter of some sort. You might want to give money to initiatives to help improve the community. It's something we all need to pay attention to. It's something that we should all be a part of. And if you live in the Chicago area, I would like to invite you to do that, to step up and try to make a difference. And again, don't gentrify. Don't step in from the outside. Okay, here's what we need to do to make this more appealing to me. Talk to the people who live there. Interact with the people who live there. See what their wants and needs are and how you can help, right? Signal boost. That's the best thing that anyone with privilege of any kind, which is pretty much all of us, can do, is to signal boost for those who don't have it. And, to not try to explain their situation to them or try to shut their voice out and explain their situation to other people with your own voice. It's the ability to signal boost and the ability to lift their voices up that is the beauty, I guess, of having certain privileges in life. That's the thing that you can do. You don't have to sit around and feel bad about yourself. You don't have to hate yourself. I hear so many people say, well, what are you asking me to do? Hate myself? It's like, no, we're asking you to step up and to signal boost for people who don't have the privileges that you have and don't have the voice that you have and don't have the ability to make a difference that you have. It won't hurt. It's not painful. Might not even cost anything, right? So this is what we can do. This is how we can use our privilege and avoid just sitting around feeling bad about our privilege or ignoring our privilege. We can use it. We can be constructive with it. We can signal boost and uplift and lift up other people's voices and other people's platforms so that finally they're high enough to be seen. Finally, they're loud enough to be heard. And we can help them to change their neighborhoods in the ways that they want and need to change them, right? We can listen to them. We can assist them in building their own future. It's as simple as that. So I hope that answered your questions as to what it's like to be in Chicago, what it's like to, have experience living in the area, what it's like to have traveled through the different kind of 3 cities of Chicago. And I guarantee you, again, once more, it's not a war zone. The South Side has its issues, that's for sure. But on the whole, the city is really wonderful. And, all that the people on the South Side want is to have the same chances that those on the North Side have. Even if they don't have the same exact, opulent lifestyle that folks living in the Loop might have, they want to have the same chances that, say, like a North Sider would have, right? I hope that helps. I hope that answers the question, and I hope that gets you thinking and gets the wheels turning about what maybe you can do in your community or what you can do to help boost the voices of people who are on the South Side of Chicago or in similar communities across the United States and throughout the world. I hope that gives you an idea about what you can do with your privilege rather than deny that you have it or sit there and hate yourself, right? I hope that this has helped and been enlightening and informative. If you have experience yourself with the South Side of Chicago, with Chicago in general, please feel free to chime in. I'm more than happy to hear what you have to say. And I really think my listeners would benefit from your experience and your own expertise. Folks, thank you for listening in. Be thoughtful, be mindful, and remember that you're not alone. Oh, and before I forget, and before we're completely out of time here, I wish I could be more confident about this, but we are likely to be back this evening, okay, with a very special guest. If we are not with you this evening, it will probably be next Wednesday. Now, my guest, whether we end up talking with you today or next week, is the amazing David Pino. You really need to check out his YouTube channel, which I absolutely will link in the description box. Check out David Pino's YouTube channel. He's absolutely amazing. We're actually going to be talking about a really interesting subject. There is, for those of you who don't know, I'll give you a little intro here before we run out of time. There is a segment of the Black population who, you may not know this, but who actually have very similar ideas, white right, to the alt-right, to neo-Nazis and white nationalists or white supremacists. They have existed in some form or another since at least the 1960s, perhaps even further back, but today's iteration is called Hotep, and we're going to be talking about them, and we're going to be talking about just what that is, what that encompasses, and how it's harmful. It's harmful. David talks about this a lot. He's got a lot of expertise about it, and I really want to invite you to check back and join us. I wish I could be more specific on time. We're still going back and forth and trying to see what we can make work between both of our busy schedules, but I think it's going to be a really interesting and important episode to listen to. So check back, and I hope to hear from you guys very soon about what your thoughts are on today's show. Again, thanks for listening. Be well. You're not alone.
Cause we've done this before, so you come on in. Make yourself at my home, tell me where you been. Pour yourself something cold.